Welcome to WW2 Heroic Tales, where true stories of courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary heroism come alive from the darkest days of World War II. Join us as we uncover the untold moments that shaped history. April 6, 1941. Without a declaration of war, the skies above Belgrade erupt in fire and terror. Hundreds of Luftwaffe bombers, flying in merciless waves, unleash Operation Punishment. Their target is not just military infrastructure, but the very soul of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. The city burns. Within days, the ground invasion, codenamed Operation 25, begins. Panzer divisions slice through the country from multiple directions: Germany from the north, Italy from the west, Hungary from the northeast. The Royal Yugoslav Army, poorly equipped, strategically outmaneuvered and crippled by internal ethnic tensions, collapses in just 11 days. It is a stunningly swift and humiliating defeat. The king flees into exile and the government capitulates. What follows is not just occupation, but complete dismemberment. The Third Reich and its allies carve up the nation like a carcass. Germany annexes northern Slovenia and asserts control over a puppet Serbia. Italy seizes southern Slovenia, the Dalmatian coast, and parts of Montenegro and Kosovo. Hungary and Bulgaria claim their own pieces. On the ruins, the most brutal of puppet regimes is born: the independent state of Croatia, or NDH, led by the fascist Ustaše. This new state immediately begins a genocidal campaign against Serbs, Jews, and Roma people, adding a layer of unimaginable horror to the Axis occupation. For the people of Yugoslavia, it is a moment of absolute despair. Their nation is gone, their army shattered, and their future is a vision of slavery and extermination under the fascist jackboot. In this abyss of defeat, surrender seemed the only option. But in the jagged mountains and dense forests of the Balkans, the embers of resistance were already beginning to glow, ready to ignite a fire that would consume entire Axis armies. From the ashes of defeat, two distinct movements for resistance emerged, each with a vastly different vision for the future. The first were the Chetniks, royalists loyal to the exiled government, led by Colonel Draža Mihailović, primarily composed of Serbian nationalists. Their initial goal was to wait for an Allied invasion before launching a full-scale uprising, engaging in limited sabotage while trying to preserve their strength. But another, more radical force was stirring. The Communist Party of Yugoslavia, outlawed for 2 decades, had a disciplined, clandestine network already in place. Their leader was a charismatic and enigmatic figure known by his revolutionary nom de guerre, Tito. Josip Broz Tito, a Croatian metalworker and veteran of the Russian Revolution, saw not just an opportunity to fight the occupiers, but to forge a new nation. When Germany launched its invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, the call to arms from the Communist Party was immediate and absolute. It was a call that transcended the ethnic hatreds the Axis sought to exploit. Their slogan was SMRT Fascismu, Sloboda Narodu, death to fascism, freedom to the people. Their vision was one of brotherhood and unity, uniting Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Bosniaks, and others into a single pan-Yugoslav anti-fascist front. This ideological clarity gave them a powerful edge. While the Chetniks often became bogged down in ethnic conflicts, even collaborating with Italian and later German forces to fight their communist rivals, the Partisans, as they came to be known, welcomed anyone willing to fight the invaders, regardless of ethnicity or religion. Their structure was decentralized, their tactics brutal and efficient. They were not waiting for an Allied landing. They were creating their own war, a people's war of national liberation, fought village by village, mountain by mountain. This was the birth of the National Liberation Army and partisan detachments of Yugoslavia, an army of ghosts that would rise from the rubble of a dead kingdom to become the most formidable resistance movement in all of occupied Europe. In the late summer of 1941, as partisan attacks on Axis garrisons and communication lines intensified across Serbia, something extraordinary happened. The resistance fighters did more than just harass the enemy. They drove them out completely from a large swathe of territory in the western part of the region. Here, nestled amongst the mountains, they established the Republic of Užice, the first liberated territory in wartime Europe. For 67 days, from September to November 1941, Užice was a beacon of defiance. It was a functioning, self-governing statelet operating deep within Hitler's fortress Europe. Under partisan administration, life was radically reorganized. People's committees were established to govern the towns and villages, creating a new form of local power. A makeshift arms factory, established in the vaults of the National Bank in the town of Užice, churned out over 21,000 rifles and hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition. Tailors worked day and night producing uniforms. A printing press published the newspaper Borba, the struggle spreading news of the resistance and countering Axis propaganda. The partisans even ran a postal service and managed the railway lines within their territory. This fledgling republic was a powerful symbol. It proved that the occupation could be broken, and that an alternative to fascist rule was not just a dream, but a tangible reality. It attracted new recruits from all over the region, swelling the partisan ranks. However, this open defiance could not be tolerated by the Germans. In late November, the Wehrmacht launched the first enemy offensive, a massive, coordinated assault to annihilate the partisan state. German armored columns, supported by devastating air power, closed in on Užice. The partisans fought fiercely but were hopelessly outgunned. The Republic was crushed. Tito and the partisan main staff were forced into a desperate retreat, leading thousands of fighters and civilian refugees across the frozen mountains into Bosnia. They had lost their territory, but they had gained invaluable experience and, more importantly, had proven that liberation was possible. The legend of Užice would fuel their struggle through the dark years ahead. The fall of the Užice Republic marked the beginning of a new, more brutal phase of the war. Forced into the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Dinaric Alps, the partisans would endure a relentless series of 7 major Axis offensives, each one designed to encircle and utterly destroy their movement. This was a war of annihilation, a saga of survival against impossible odds. The mountains became both their sanctuary and their prison. The German High Command, infuriated by the persistent rebellion that tied down hundreds of thousands of valuable troops, threw everything they had at the partisans: elite German Gebirgsjäger mountain divisions, Italian Alpine troops, Bulgarian Army Corps, and collaborationist Ustash and Chetnik forces were all deployed in massive pincer movements. Each offensive was given a code name like Case White or Case Black, and each followed a similar, terrifying pattern: a vast encirclement, a tightening of the ring, and a desperate, bloody breakout by the partisans. Life for the partisan fighters was a ceaseless ordeal. They were constantly on the move, marching through blizzards in winter and scorching heat in summer. Food was scarce, often consisting of little more than boiled corn or scavenged livestock. Ammunition was a precious commodity, captured from the enemy or painstakingly hoarded. Typhus and other diseases ravaged their ranks. Their greatest burden was their wounded. Refusing to abandon their comrades, the partisans created a mobile hospital, carrying thousands of injured and sick fighters on makeshift stretchers through the most treacherous terrain, all while under constant attack from Stuka dive bombers and enemy patrols. This commitment to their own defined the partisan ethos. It slowed them down, made them vulnerable, but it was non-negotiable. It forged a bond of solidarity that steel could not break. In these crucibles of suffering, the partisan army was hardened. They perfected the art of guerrilla warfare: lightning raids, sabotage of railway lines, ambushes in narrow mountain passes, and then melting away before the enemy could bring their superior firepower to bear. The 7 offensives failed to break them. Each time they were cornered, they would find a gap, punch through, and escape, bloodied but unbowed, ready to fight another day. By early 1943, the partisan threat had become so significant that the Axis launched their 4th enemy offensive, codenamed Case White. The objective was the complete destruction of the partisan main operational group and its central hospital. Nearly 150,000 Axis and collaborationist soldiers closed in on a much smaller partisan force of around 20,000 fighters, who were burdened with over 4,000 wounded. They were cornered in a deep canyon, their only escape route across the icy, raging Neretva River. All the bridges had been destroyed. The situation was beyond desperate. Trapped with their backs to the water, German forces pressing from one side and their bitter rivals, the Chetniks, now openly collaborating with the Italians, blocking the other, annihilation seemed certain. It was in this moment of crisis that Tito conceived one of the most brilliant deceptions of the war. He gave a startling order: destroy the last remaining bridge over the Neretva. To his own commanders, it seemed like madness. To the Axis commanders observing from the surrounding hills, it was a clear signal. They believed the partisans, unable to cross the river, were preparing for a suicidal breakout attempt back towards the north, directly into the teeth of the main German force. The Germans began redeploying their divisions to counter this expected move, thinning their lines along the river itself. But Tito's order was a masterful feint. Under the cover of darkness and relentless Axis bombardment, partisan engineers worked feverishly. They constructed a light, improvised wooden footbridge right alongside the wreckage of the demolished structure. As the Germans shifted their forces north, Tito wheeled his elite proletarian brigades around. In a ferocious, all-out assault, they smashed through the surprised Chetnik lines on the opposite bank, securing a bridgehead. For days and nights, the entire partisan force, including every single one of their 4,000 wounded, was ferried across the precarious, swaying bridge. The Battle of the Neretva, also known as the Battle for the Wounded, was a stunning victory born from tactical genius and sheer audacity. They had not only saved their army and their hospital, but had also decisively defeated and politically discredited the Chetniks, proving them to be Axis collaborators. It was a turning point that echoed all the way to Allied high command. Their escape at the Neretva was miraculous, but the respite was brief. The Germans were enraged. Determined to finish the job once and for all, they immediately launched the Fifth Enemy Offensive in May 1943. Codenamed Case Black, or the Battle of the Sutjeska, it would become the most brutal, grueling, and legendary battle of the entire Yugoslav Liberation War. This time, there would be no clever deceptions. It was a straightforward battle of attrition and survival. The Germans committed their best troops, including the elite 1st Mountain Division and the 7th SS Volunteer Mountain Division, Prince Eugen, supported by overwhelming air power. A force of 127,000 Axis soldiers trapped 22,000 partisans in a barren, mountainous cauldron near the Sutjeska River in southeastern Bosnia. The ring of steel was absolute. Generaloberst Alexander Lurher, the German commander, issued a chilling order: leave no man alive. For a month, the partisans were relentlessly pounded from the air and squeezed from all sides. Food ran out completely. They ate grass and tree bark. Ammunition dwindled to a few rounds per soldier. The fighters, exhausted and starving, had to repel constant, determined attacks from fresh, well-supplied German mountain troops. The fighting was savage, often devolving into desperate hand-to-hand combat on jagged limestone cliffs. In the midst of the chaos, on June 9th, a bomb splinter from an aerial attack struck the partisan command group. Tito was wounded in the arm, saved from death only by his loyal German shepherd, Lux, who threw himself on his master and was killed by the blast. Bleeding but defiant, Tito remained in command. The only hope was a breakout. The 1st Proletarian Division was tasked with punching a hole through the German lines along the Sutjeska. In a desperate, near-suicidal charge, they clawed their way through a narrow gap, establishing a fragile corridor. For 2 days, the main partisan force, including Tito and the command staff, fought their way through this corridor under withering fire. But they could not save everyone. The 2nd Proletarian Division and the Central Hospital, with over 2,000 wounded, were cut off and overrun. They were systematically killed, along with the medical staff who refused to abandon them. The partisans lost over 75 fighters, a third of their force. Sutjeska was a tactical German victory, but a catastrophic strategic failure. The partisan main force, though horribly mauled, had survived. Their unbreakable will in the face of annihilation proved to a watching world that they were not just rebels, but a disciplined and formidable army. While the partisans were fighting for their lives at Sutjeska, another battle was being waged, a battle of intelligence, diplomacy, and perception. Since the start of the occupation, the Western Allies, particularly Great Britain, had placed their bets on Draža Mihailović and his Chetniks. From London, he was portrayed as the heroic leader of the Yugoslav resistance. Weapons, gold, and supplies were sent to his forces. The British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, had liaison officers embedded with his command. However, reports from the ground painted a disturbing picture. Agents confirmed that the Chetniks were largely inactive against the Germans. Worse, evidence was mounting of their active collaboration with Italian and German forces in their bitter civil war against the partisans. Communications intercepted by the codebreakers at Bletchley Park confirmed this collaboration beyond any doubt. In contrast, the partisans, despite being communists, were tying down dozens of Axis divisions. Their constant activity was a major drain on German resources that could have been used on the Eastern Front or in Italy. Winston Churchill, a staunch anti-communist, was a pragmatist above all else. His primary concern was simple: who was killing more Germans? The answer was becoming increasingly clear. To get a definitive answer, the British sent a series of high-level missions directly into partisan territory. The most famous of these was led by Brigadier Fitzroy McLean, a daring diplomat and soldier, who parachuted into Bosnia in September 1943. McLean met with Tito and was profoundly impressed. He witnessed firsthand the partisans' discipline, their effectiveness in combat, and their broad support among the population. He reported back to Churchill directly, stating that the partisans were a far more powerful and reliable military force than the Chetniks, and that their fight against the Germans was real and relentless. His reports, combined with the partisans' incredible resilience during the Neretva and Sutjeska battles, tipped the scales. At the Tehran Conference in late 1943, the Big Three, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill, made a landmark decision. All Allied support would be officially and exclusively shifted to Tito's partisans. The spigot to the Chetniks was turned off. Soon, the skies above partisan-held territory were filled with the drone of RAF Halifaxes and American B-24s, dropping crates of Sten guns, explosives, medical supplies, and uniforms. For the long-suffering partisans, it was a moment of profound vindication and a crucial turning point in their struggle for liberation. The shift in Allied support, combined with the surrender of Italy in September 1943, acted as a massive force multiplier for the partisan movement. When the Italian army capitulated, the partisans moved with lightning speed to disarm entire Italian divisions in their occupation zones, seizing a vast arsenal of weaponry. Suddenly, they were equipped with tens of thousands of rifles, hundreds of machine guns, and crucially, artillery, mortars, and even tanks. This influx of heavy equipment fundamentally changed the nature of their army. They began to evolve from a scattered collection of guerrilla bands into a formidable, conventional fighting force. The National Liberation Army was formally organized into divisions and corps, capable of conducting large-scale offensive operations. By late 1944, their numbers had swelled from a few thousand beleaguered fighters to a disciplined army of over 650,000 men and women under arms. They established their own naval detachments on the Adriatic coast, their own Air Force squadron flying planes supplied by the British, and even their own armored brigades using captured Italian M13/40 tanks and German Panzer IVs. Parallel to this military transformation was a political one. In November 1943, in the liberated Bosnian town of Jajce, the Partisans held the second session of the Anti-Fascist Council for the National Liberation of Yugoslavia, or AVNOJ. This was their parliament. Here, they made a series of momentous decisions that would shape the future of the nation. They declared AVNOJ as the new provisional government, officially denied the authority of the exiled royal government in London, and forbade King Peter from returning to the country. They laid the groundwork for a new, federal Yugoslavia, a socialist republic based on the equality of all its constituent nations. This was an audacious political move, effectively creating a state within a state, long before the war was won. By 1944, the Partisans controlled huge swathes of Yugoslav territory. They were no longer just hiding in the mountains. They were administering liberated cities, running their own logistics, and waging a full-scale war. They had become a government, an army, and a nation in waiting, forged in the crucible of resistance. By the autumn of 1944, the strategic situation in Europe had dramatically shifted. The Soviet Red Army, having shattered the German Army Group Center in Operation Bagration, was now advancing relentlessly across the Balkans. As they pushed through Romania and Bulgaria, they approached the borders of Yugoslavia. For the Partisans, this was the moment they had been fighting for. The final liberation of their country was at hand. In September, Tito flew to Moscow to meet with Stalin and coordinate a joint strategy. The plan they devised was ambitious: a combined offensive to liberate the capital city, Belgrade, and destroy the German army group Serbia. The Belgrade offensive, launched in mid-September 1944, was a massive, combined arms operation. It was the culmination of the Partisans' journey from guerrilla warfare to conventional combat. On the ground, powerful Partisan corps, battle-hardened and now well-equipped, advanced on the capital from the south and west. From the east, they were joined by the might of the Soviet Third Ukrainian Front, with its powerful armored divisions and artillery. The operation was also supported from the air by the Balkan Air Force, a joint Allied command of British, American, and Partisan air units. For weeks, ferocious fighting raged in the approaches to the city. The German forces, caught between the hammer of the Red Army and the anvil of the Partisans, fought a desperate and bloody retreat. The battle for Belgrade itself was a brutal, street-by-street affair that lasted from October 14th to the 20th. Partisan units, who knew the city intimately, led the charge, clearing buildings and storming German strongpoints, supported by the heavy armor of Soviet T-34 tanks. The citizens of Belgrade, who had endured years of brutal occupation, rose up to help the liberators, guiding them through back alleys and pointing out enemy positions. On October 20th, 1944, the Red Star banner of the Partisans and the red flag of the Soviet Union were hoisted over the city. Belgrade was free. The victory was a powerful symbol of their unique position in the war. An army that fought with its own strength while coordinating successfully with both the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. With their capital liberated, the path was clear for the final push to expel the last German forces from Yugoslav soil. The story of the Yugoslav Partisans is not just one of armies and offensives. It is a story of profound human sacrifice and an unyielding spirit of defiance. This was a people's war, and its cost was staggering. What made the partisan army unique was its inclusivity. Over 100,000 women served in its ranks, not just as nurses or couriers, but as frontline soldiers, commanders, and political commissars. A level of female participation unmatched by any other European army in World War II. Furthermore, in a continent consumed by the Holocaust, the partisan movement became a sanctuary and a weapon for Jewish people. Over 45,000 Jewish fighters joined their ranks, with 10 being named national heroes. For them, joining the partisans was not just an act of resistance, but an act of survival and vengeance. The ethos of the movement was defined by an absolute refusal to surrender, an idea embodied in the final moments of its heroes. One of the most iconic images of defiance from the entire war is that of Stjepan Filipovic, a partisan commander captured and sentenced to death. He stood on the gallows in 1942, a noose around his neck. Instead of begging for his life, he thrust his arms high in the air and shouted to the crowd of assembled townspeople, his final words a call to arms. Smrt fascismu, sloboda narodu. Death to fascism, freedom to the people. His cry became the official slogan of the movement. Equally powerful is the story of Lepa Radic, a 17-year-old partisan captured by the Germans in 1943. When they offered to spare her life if she revealed the names of her comrades, she refused. As she stood at the gallows, she told her executioners that her comrades would reveal themselves when they came to avenge her death. These were not isolated incidents. They represent the spirit that animated the entire movement, a commitment to an idea that was more powerful than the fear of death. It was this ideological fervor, this willingness to sacrifice everything for the cause of a free and united Yugoslavia, that made the partisans an unstoppable force. When the final German surrender came in May 1945, the war in Europe was officially over. But for the Yugoslav partisans, the fight continued for another week as they mopped up the last pockets of German and collaborationist resistance. When the guns finally fell silent, the partisans stood alone as a singular achievement in the history of World War II. They were the only major resistance movement in occupied Europe to liberate their country without the large-scale ground invasion of Allied armies. While they received crucial Allied aid later in the war and coordinated with the Red Army, the vast majority of the fighting and dying to free their homeland was done by them. Their struggle had been immense. tying down as many as 35 Axis divisions at its peak, a contribution to the overall Allied victory that cannot be overstated. More than just liberating their territory, they had simultaneously won a civil war and engineered a political revolution. On March 1, 1945, the National Liberation Army was formally reorganized into the Yugoslav People's Army, the armed forces of a new state. Tito, the mysterious revolutionary leader, became a world-renowned statesman. The partisan movement, born in the fire of invasion, became the foundation myth and the ruling institution of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. This new nation, built on the partisan principle of brotherhood and unity, would navigate a treacherous path through the Cold War, famously breaking with Stalin's Soviet Union in 1948 to forge its own independent brand of socialism and become a leader of the non-aligned movement. The legacy is complex and, following the tragic wars of the 1990s, contested. But the wartime achievement remains undeniable. A scattered band of idealists, driven into the mountains, not only survived 7 attempts at annihilation, but grew into a mighty army that defied an empire, destroyed its domestic rivals, and single-handedly raised its own flag over a liberated and reborn nation. Thank you for joining WW2 Heroic Tales. Through the stories of brave souls from World War II, we honor their memory and keep their legacy alive for history and generations to come.